joke. Yeah.
Speaking of 42, it was Jackie Robinson Day last week.
Oh wow.
42, of course, retired throughout Major League Baseball in honor of Jackie Robinson, the great
Amen.
Jackie Robinson.
Yeah. 7:04 on the Breeze side. We're KUAM FM. I got you, Guam. Remember 8 o'clock? We jump on KUAM TV.
Yep. Channel 8 will
Yes,
be there.
thank you.
On NBC right now, we have got auto racing.
Oh yeah, great.
We had hockey before.
Yeah.
If you don't buy your scarf, you can't go outside and play hockey.
I caught some auto racing on the way into work.
Really? That early in the morning?
Me. Yeah. 7:05. Let's head into the Zoom room where we're graced with the presence of former senators Wil Castro and Kelly Marsh Taitano. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for answering the call. I got a hold of these guys over the weekend. I was like, man, you know what would be cool is if you come on and we play a little catch up, and then you talk about your perspective on everything that's happening now, because it kind of seems when you guys left office, things have really like ramped up, and now it's almost to me reached this boiling point when you talk about the kind of the posture between the legislature and the administration over this like $600 million in the American Rescue Plan funds. And, you know, it's been a few months since you guys were in office, but the conversation is exactly the same. Transparency and accountability. That's all we hear about from the legislature. Basically calling out the administration like, hey, we don't know what you guys are doing. We don't know what the plan is. And so I thought it was interesting because it made me kind of think about the tail end of the last legislative term, the 35th, when there was a transparency bill. And it was kind of the same deal. And you two were, a couple of the senators who were trying to raise the alarm about the administration being more transparent and accountable. So we'll get into that. But first, let's do all the niceties. Like, how you guys been?
I'll go, Doctor. Finit.
Well, incredibly busy. I've been doing a lot of research, and I'm preparing for me, I'm personally very excited. I've long wanted to teach anthropology at the university, and so I'll be teaching anthropology in the fall. And part of why I'm excited about it is I really feel like it changed the trajectory of where I was going. You know, when I first started UOG, I was going to be a PE instructor, and then I joined ROTC, and I was going to be an officer. But then I took anthropology, and it took me in a different direction. And I'm really glad it did, because it helped me understand it and appreciate and fall more in love with our island and our region.
I just can't even wrap my mind around you and ROTC, and
I think she would look good in green.
You know, and I've got green eyes, so that's part of it. But you know, I surprise people sometimes because I'm a mother of 3, I'm a grandmother of 4, and so I totally can bring out that mom voice and that teacher voice when I have to. So yeah, so I pictured it would help me as an officer as well, being able to pull out that that stern voice. So.
Will, you got something in the comments here? Angel P. Quintanilla Castro. Good morning, brother Will. How you doing?
Buenas and half a day para todos Samzulokui. The same as the doctor. I had a lot of time to put some stock into family. My son was accepted into the National Honor Society. That's awesome. And my daughter's trying out for volleyball, so I get to attend to a lot of these activities. And in addition to that, I've been putting in time in these fraternities like the YMLG and the Knights of Columbus. And then also just trying to look at a different path for myself, Chris. I founded the One Marianas Initiative. It's a not-for-profit corporation to continue the good work and strengthening the ties with our brothers and sisters in the Sinamay. And so that in and of itself has kept me busy. And other than that, I could say I wake up with peace of mind every day. It's not quite the same, huh, Kelly, in terms of waking up as a senator and in these rough waters when you got to balance competing ideas, and not just the ideas, but the personalities. And I'm sure Chris is going to get into that in a bit.
Yeah. Well, you know, a lot of the research that I've been doing, I'm doing some research as a research associate, but then also with Guampedia, and going back in time into the 50s and 60s and really seeing the fights that we've had to do and the leaders that have had to stand up along the way to stand up for Sela, that Sela didn't become an ammunitions wharf. And right now I'm researching about Tumon, how we had to really fight to keep Tumon from Ipao to Fafai or Gun Beach. They wanted to take the whole area as a recreation area. So, like you said, finding these balances where we need to figure out the way to live together, but we definitely need our leaders to be standing up and saying, hey, there have to be some limits, and there are some things that are so important to our community that we need to keep that balance in mind.
That's really interesting, Senator Kelly, that when you talk about some of these movements that have happened in the past, maybe even with a generation that a lot of us felt was just so beholden to the military because of the liberation, right? Like my grandfather always had this weird dichotomy of feeling where, yes, obviously there was some gratitude living under the American system and having been liberated by the Americans. But then on the other side, he just had a real issue with a lot of the military members who were stationed here and just kind of the attitude that they had. And they would have this saying that he'd always say, like, Marines, F Marine. I'm sure you heard that in you guys' generation, right? So I always thought it was interesting that the generation gone by, when you get these people who talk about, the Bonomco, they're so pro-American. Yeah, they were, but then my grandfather also saw what was happening with the military and just kind of like the brazen attitude that they had in regards to the land. I mean, there was always the land taking. And just the treatment of the environment. So I think it's interesting to draw those parallels between what's happening now and the people who stood up and voiced concerns and were successful in kind of mitigating the military buildup back then, and then drawing the parallel to what's happening now, right?
No, and it was really important that those things happen, and maybe, over time, it can seem difficult to keep that up, but we have to keep it up, because if we think long term, just think about what we would have if we didn't have Sela. Like I hiked down to Sela, not this Sunday, but the Sunday before, and it took me like all week to recuperate because the hike down is easy, but the hike back up, you're hiking up pretty much a mountain to get back up. But if we hadn't stood up, then we wouldn't have Sela. And, we talk about it in a variety of ways in my History in Guahan or my History of Guam class. And some of it is maybe those cultural differences about, what you ask for. And so there was this comparison, if you will, about, if you were at somebody's house, like in the islands, you would know if somebody offers you like, what do you want to drink? We have iced tea. And you say, I only drink Diet Coke. I'd rather have that if you have, and we all know absolutely what would happen is that family, they don't have Diet Coke, but they would send somebody in their family out to get it. And, I had then asked them, this was an outsider who had done something like this, right? And didn't realize that if they asked for kind of too much, that the Chamorro family would of course send somebody out to go get it, because they would go that extra mile. Whereas I asked them, I said, well, if you had been there and your mother had heard you ask for a Diet Coke when the host said they only had iced tea, what would happen to you? And so she said, my mom would smack me in the back of the head, because you know not to ask for too much. You know your hosts are going to be accommodating and they're going to go above and beyond. And I think that's some of the differences. We have the U.S. asking for some of these things, and it can be
but the U.S.
difficult.
needs to realize that we don't have Diet Coke. We only have Quantum Ice and
asking for Diet Coke is too much. And they have a responsibility. Like, we know that the guest has a responsibility. It's not just the host has a responsibility to be welcoming, but we, the guests, have a responsibility not to ask for too much or to not to make ourselves too much of an imposition. And so I think that's some of what happens, but maybe Will has something to
Yeah,
say
he
there.
does, of course.
My only contribution here, Doc, you're doing well, is solo na mangay respetunya. That's it. I think the respect has to go both ways. It's a necessary partnership in many respects. I still believe in the return of excess federal properties. I still believe in the respect of treating our ancient remains and our culture, language, and heritage sacrosanct. And so as long as they come here and participate in this advancement of American democracy and respect this great Chamorro nation, I have no problems with that. But I agree with you, Doc, in more ways than one.
Right. Let's move on here, guys, to well, I guess we'll just start with this whole issue of the $600-some million that we're getting from the American Rescue Plan, and this kind of battle that's been brewing. I think because a lot of it stems from the CARES Act money and how the legislature was just shut out of anything to do with how that was spent for the most part. I think there was a bill with Senator Shelton and one of the aid programs that she had put out. But I think that the senators, you guys are part of this, you saw how you had zero input with that. And now we've got a bill. The senators are talking about, hey, Governor Lou, Lieutenant Governor Josh, give us a list, give us a plan. What are we going to do with this money? What do you guys just kind of make of this whole struggle and the conversation that's being had between, well, I don't know if you could call it a conversation really, between the administration and the legislature over this American Rescue Plan money? Don't all answer at once now.
Wait, I'll go ahead and kick us off, Senator. You might be in a precarious situation.
I think we're both being a little bit polite of like, I'll defer to Will. I'll defer
well,
to Kelly.
I'll just take the same position I took when I was the sitting senator. That no harm can ever come from being transparent. What I saw Senator Chris and the others trying to do is basically exacting for reports to come down. I don't see the harm there. But what I would do differently, if they're not already doing it, I'm sure Chris and Tony Ada, Senator Ada, are working this angle. But I would work with the Democrat leadership in Ways and Means. Senator Kelly, I remember there was a lot of frustration the last term we had in terms of working across the aisle and with the executive branch and getting some collaboration together. But Senator Joe was able to tie it together to an extent for the duration that we were able to close out that COVID experience as senators. But I just don't see the harm in asking for more information. I know that the director of BBMR, when asked in a public panel, would disclose that information willingly. I've been there in person and I've seen him disclose that, maybe not line by line, but I see him give out the aggregate reports. And so the federal money is still the people's money, no matter how you look at it. And I don't know if they work that angle. Kelly, you have a better perspective in terms of the Democrat majority?
Well, I fall in line very similar to you, is that a conversation is good and open communication is good. So, the more that's happening, I think it's really important. There is a division as to who has authority over these monies. I mean, it does come down to the executive branch, and then it gets into that division of authority. But I think Senator Joe made some good points this morning in the article that I read, where, he was saying that it's going to come down to how they frame the budget. And I think this is going to be some of how the legislature gets a little bit of control and say. So I'm hoping that there are conversations that are happening, because we don't see everything from the outside, right, and conversations do happen. But I hope that they continue to build those, and it will be interesting to see how this budget is framed and goes forward.
Well, let me ask, because this is something that we talked about on this show, I want to say about 3-4 weeks back. Do you guys think that if it's coming down to this struggle and, outside of going to court over it, which I think they're doing in other jurisdictions in the continental United States, but let's say, for example, I'd like to use this example of the GVB president and permitting czar, Uncle Carl, had come on and said, hey, I'm going to ask Lou for $20 million to market tourism. And then when we had the governor on this show, we said, hey, are you going to give former Governor Carl $20 million? And she was like, yeah, I'm going to give it to him. So knowing that, going into these budget hearings, do you think the legislature should start deducting money from whatever budget request is in front of them? Like, oh, GVB, you're getting $20 million from Lou, let's go ahead and minus that from your request.
Well, I wouldn't just outright say yes. I think it's a question of scrutinizing how that money's going to matriculate. But I think Joe and his capable team can do the math in terms of the revenues generated as a result of that activity. You can't just basically supplant local revenues or your anticipated local revenues with something anticipatory, right? You can't anticipate that the governor is going to outright give 20 million. You have to sort of get the finer details in. I took the opposite argument as well last time, Chris. I basically put it on the table and said that federal stimulus is not an economic revitalization strategy. It's no way, it's not reliable. But in this case, if we know definitively how it's going to impact GDP, then maybe you can. But it'll be an unfair posture to hold the executive branch and the revenues of Gov Guam hostage to what you anticipate. But I think what Joe can do is anticipate the revenues in terms of the residual taxes that derive from that. No one knows if you're going to have 5 million in this direction or that direction. That's why I think the senators who are wanting greater accountability, whether it's in the form of a strategic plan or an expenditure report, is the right direction to go. That's what I think. But to outright say, no, we're going to cut you by 40 million because there are reports that you're going to get 40 million. It doesn't work that way, Kelly. I think you remember in the Budget and Finance Committee, it's brutal. When we have the open floor and open sessions committee, that was brutal because we challenged the assumptions. And the first assumption cannot be that we're basing an entire revenue based on mass media reports, as an example.
Right.
Well, Senator, I don't know if it's basing it on mass media reports because we heard from the horses' mouths themselves. Carl said, yeah, I'm getting 20. And the governor said, yeah, I'm giving him 20. So it's not really speculation.
Well, is it this fiscal year? Is it the next fiscal year? I'm not defending the administration. I'm just trying to take a very deliberate approach. Will she give him 10 million this year or 10 million next year? And again, that's September 30 versus October 1. I don't have the details. And any responsible lawmaker should be able to examine the details before making a final decision, in my opinion.
We had a comment here from Rosemary. During the deliberations on the RISE Act, did either of you pick up on the governor's concern of possible unfairness to GovGuam workers? And also, what's your stance on the RISE Act as this has become... it's just become something that they didn't want to pay out, and people keep asking about it, and it's kind of become this lightning rod where you had Senator Moylan saying, "Hey, pay the RISE Act," and it's become a talking point for the Republicans, I think, which is so ironic because it was a Democrat initiative. Senator Taitano?
Well, yeah, the way that I remember it being discussed on the floor, and Senator Wil can chime in here, the way that I remember it being discussed on the floor is, legislative action can take a while. That's due process. We don't want it to go too fast. We need the hearings, we need the deliberation, we need time for research, all of that. And so this bill, we had seen that during certain emergencies, we wanted to get aid to the people, but that it was taking 2 months, 3 months to have it go through the different processes. And then there's also no guarantee that we can meet. If something happens and we can't physically meet because somebody has to be, or several senators have to be in quarantine, it can slow the process down further. So it was pitched to us as having it in the back pocket, not to use immediately, not to use the next day, the next month, but to have in the back pocket so that when that emergency time came up, the governor wouldn't have to send down a bill and wait 3 months. The governor would be able to reach into her back pocket, figuratively speaking, and be able to pull it out. But maybe you remember some other details? Senator Wil?
Gosh, this is history repeating itself. It didn't matter if it's LG or Calvo or whoever else before that. I hate to make this public statement, but it's a reality of my experience is that it's the golden rule. He who controls or she who controls the gold rules. And unfortunately, certain administrations have that privilege to determine which laws take precedent over another. What I can tell you, and I could pitch for the Republican Party, is that I'm very, very happy that the Republican caucus has been introducing bills that would ask for greater accountability, that would reduce the BPT. I think it was 3% that one of the Republican senators introduced, that would like more money to go into a program to grow micro industries. So we've seen it with Calvo, and now the tables have turned, right? And so I'm very curious to see how the 36th Guam legislature rolls that out in their oversight hearings, because when it was Governor Calvo, there wouldn't be a week or a month that went by that they wouldn't attempt to tie his hands and exact certain accountings of monies, whether it was the emergency, right, for the natural disaster, or for other things like the pool, as an example. And so the tables have turned, and I'm curious to see how the Democrat majority is going to hold the administration accountable.
Yeah, you know, one thing that did come to my mind both during and up to now it is the concern with this idea of the government of Guam workers, and part of that is that a lot of government of Guam workers are actually frontliners, and so yeah, you know, you were saying, Chris, before that there's kind of these dichotomies and these two different sides to things. So on one hand, they did continue working, which was very important to the economy, to have people with these full-time jobs pumping money into the economy. That helped out a lot of businesses in the big picture. But at the same time, you know, some of them, or a good number of them, have been frontliners, you know, at GMH and elsewhere. And so,
man, I love my GovGuam employees. I love my GovGuam employees, Senator Kelly. They're very, very hardworking, but I just have to disagree a little bit and say that I'm not sure what the numbers are, but a lot of government and Guam employees, yes, are frontliners, but a lot also got to stay. But a lot got to stay home and, you know, I don't want to say do nothing, but they earn a paycheck, which it really, and going back, I think it's kind of like eased over, but this was like really divisive for the private sector, and this became something that they just wouldn't shut up about. It was like, hey, we've got all these, and, you know, rightfully so. I mean, it is what it is. We've got all these people out of work on PUA, FPUC. Meanwhile, GovGuam's workers staying home earning a paycheck. And I get what the governor was trying to do, was trying to avoid all those people migrating to these federally funded unemployment programs, but it is what it is, right?
Well, yeah, and not only that, like I said, really, I think in the big picture, we have a lot to really think about or rethink about our economy. Like I said, you know, the economists were saying, as many people as you can get to have these full-time jobs, be they grocery bag workers or somebody working for the government, they keep the wheels churning. And, you know, one of the lessons we need to learn, the economists were saying, is not to immediately want to cut everything back, because when you cut things back, people tend to save money, or they're going to be very frugal with their money, and they're not going to go out there and spend it. And the economic wheels really slow down or stop churning. And so it was really important to keep those economic wheels turning in as many ways as we could, but also, at least for me, a lot of the government, well, all of the government workers that I know of, and I don't know everybody, obviously, but they were working really hard behind the scenes, and it's real hard for us to be able to see that. My office put in extra time, actually, trying to balance out working from home and having these extra layers of procedure and protocol and things. So I know maybe it wasn't visible, but a lot of people really were working hard from home as well.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and I'm not trying to make a blanket characterization that, oh, they were all just sitting home watching Netflix or whatever. Senator Wil?
I believe I was one of those who voted for the RISE Act, and this is the perfect opportunity now to strike that balance, bring that equilibrium back. I agree with you, Senator Kelly. It was important to keep revenues flowing through the economy and so forth. This is the time, I believe, for the administration to be able to leverage those federal resources now to aid those in the private sector. I'll give you an example. I'm not even speaking philosophically. Like when I was a GovGuam employee, stable in terms of their revenue, right, for the paychecks. And so now it's time to lift up the private sector so we can move forward. If anything, Chris, and I see you have some other guests coming on, if anything, I think this pandemic has taught us that we are overly dependent on one or more industries, and that we definitely need to grow the economy so that we don't have to rest our laurels on, just say, tourism as an example. We didn't have the the military buildup, if we didn't have these federal monies consistently coming in, where would we be? I was worried about where we would be. But thankfully, the military construction, thankfully, other opportunities like economic relief from the federal government came in, because where would you be in terms of employment? And I'll tell you, Senator, if you should run again, I certainly hope you embrace diversifying the economy, greater micro industries and cottage industries and trade, and greater incentives for the private sector to develop. That's the direction I hope to go as well, is to participate more in the private sector side. But that's my little spiel, Chris.
Yeah, and I agree to a lot of what you're saying, and that's absolutely the direction I was going in as well. Is, you know, we just have to do what we can to diversify the economy. And early on, when I was senator, I actually got to go to the Pentagon. It took at least like 3 weeks of going back and forth to be able to get in there. But I sat down and I talked to some of the top planner, the top civilian planner for the military buildup. And she said, you know, the military is known for a long time that they need to be part of diversifying the economy, of making the economy not so reliant. And so even they get it. The economy has to be strong on its own, apart from these pillars, because they are vulnerable to outside forces or other forces themselves. So I couldn't agree with you more that we need to diversify cottage industries. There's so much potential, I think, in Micronesia. They have amazing resources with the produce and other things that they can create. They can set up cottage industries. It can be connected to Guam. We can work together. I'm still looking forward to, you and I worked on this, Senator, of having this Micronesian commission, this commission set up so that we can be exploring our regional ties. Taiwan has amazing research and development, that potential that we can tie into. So we really need to just push into those areas, Southeast Asia, Taiwan, Micronesia, and get it done.
One more note, Chris, if I could. If there's no pool money, if there's no federal relief money, where would the rest of the community be? And I definitely seeing this federal relief money sunsetting in the future. And if that should happen, you see a lot of families without income. And if that happens, there's no car, there's no means to get employment, and worse, if there's no jobs, they can't bring home the food for the family. And so I stand with the Republicans in that we need to stand up the economy and wean ourselves from this federal subsidy and dependency.
That's why we got the lecture from the press conference from Congressman Nicholas, which was, don't go buy a lot of nice things. What did he say? Don't avoid luxury purchases of high-end items. That was interesting. So, guys, I'm pretty sure you have something to say about that, Senator Wil. Go for it.
I say the best you're ready. I'm sorry, I missed the congressman's press conference, Chris. I know you're trying to reel me in there. I say buy a paddleboard if you can afford to get out there and work on your health, work on your mental health and your physical health, and love your family. At the end of the day, you can do away with all that good stuff, but be with your family and work on your mental, physical health. That's my positive note of the day. And I see Mayor Alex online. Is he going to chime in? You can ask us a question about the mayors, or?
Yeah, what do you guys got to say about the mayors?
I say the mayors are the front line of democracy. They work the hardest in terms of elected officials. I've seen my mayor, Jesse. My goodness, in June, they're everywhere. Jesse would take up a shovel. These guys deal with carcasses. They deal with house fire. They deal with all kinds of things that are beyond the scope of their job description. So God bless those folks out there in the mayor's council, those who work so hard in the middle of the night to get called when somebody passes away. That's just an amazing, amazing character that it takes to live up to the expectations of that community. So God bless you. It's nice to see you, Mr. Mayor. Hafa day.
Yes, and I wholeheartedly agree. The work of the mayors at that grassroots level of really stepping in and working closely with the community, it is a one big task. And those that rise up to it, really, we have to appreciate that. Hafa day, Mayor.
Lana, your dog is getting bigger, Mayor.
Hi, Jesse. And June Bloss is a great mayor from Maricopa.
Right on. Well, Senators, it's been a good, Mayor. You have anything for the former senators?
Thank you for the compliments. I appreciate it. I'm glad you're looking out for us.
Yeah. You know, and
Have a good
Chris,
one.
if I can, to just say that this morning and today is going to be just an important day, at least for me in my office. My office manager lost her fight with cancer, and so today she's having her funeral. It's happening in Saipan, but we're going to do a small ceremony here at the end of the day. So,
Well, our condolences.
she was a member of Prateya Litexan. That's how we met each other, and you know, I had her as an office manager, so that we just would be an office that would really try to stand up for what was good for the people in the long term, you know, with that long-term lens. And so she's sorely missed. I'm not sure if you knew Retta Sue Hamilton, but full of energy, always fighting for the right things and for the community, and absolutely a cultural advocate.
Well, thank you, and our condolences to her and her family, Senator. Senator Wil, thanks for stopping by. Don't be a stranger now.
Anytime, Chris. Thank you for having me, and thank you again, Senator Kelly. It's been awesome.
Yeah,
Have a wonderful week.
You guys got the Zoom link, so feel free to jump on anytime you get any of these other senators on here, and you want to like jump on and maybe do a fact check or whatever. You got the link. Come on in. Okay, Esther. Mayor, hold on. Okay, we're gonna take a quick break. That was fun. And come back with the Mayor's Council of Guam president, who's just glowing from those compliments he received from. He's like, I'm going to have a good Monday. What a